My name is Kara Mitchell, and I'm 35 years old. A few months ago, my fiance looked me dead in the eye and said, "My parents won't respect you until you pay off my student loans." I remember pausing with my wine glass halfway to my mouth. I remember the way the crystal chandelier above the dining table reflected in the dark red surface, making it look like the glass was full of tiny, sharp teeth. I smiled, set the glass down carefully, and replied, "I understand completely." Later, I would replay that moment over and over, like a scene from a movie where the audience already knows the twist coming and wants to scream at the screen. Back then, though, I was still in the role I'd been given. The sensible fiancé, the provider, the one everyone expected to be reasonable. On paper, my life is boring in the most respectable way possible. I'm a project manager at a tech company. Good salary, stable job, health insurance that doesn't make HR weep. I drive an old Honda that rattles a little when I hit 60, and my idea of splurging is guacamole and queso at the same restaurant. I've been saving for years, turning down vacations, saying no to new clothes unless something actually died in my closet, eating leftovers while my coworkers ordered delivery. It wasn't glamorous, but it was intentional. I had a plan: buy a house with a small mortgage, or, if I played it perfectly, no mortgage at all. And for a while, it looked like that plan fit neatly alongside another one: get married to Jason Miller, my boyfriend of 4 years, my fiancé of 6 months. We were supposed to have a wedding next spring. Keyword supposed. Jason is 32. He's the charming one in this relationship. He works part-time at an art gallery, the kind of place where nothing on the walls is under 3 figures, and everything smells faintly of white wine and entitlement. He's handsome, good with people, always knows which fork to use. His parents adore that about him. They live in this massive house on the good side of town, the kind with columns out front, and a lawn that looks like it has its own dedicated therapist. They drive matching luxury sedans and talk about their country club the way normal people talk about their local coffee shop. Their names are Frank and Deborah, but in my head, they've always been Mr. and Mrs. Presentation. That night at their house felt like every other family dinner before it. We ate roasted something with truffle oil. Deborah poured expensive wine and casually mentioned their last trip to Italy. Frank told a story about his golf handicap that I'd heard 3 times already. Jason laughed in all the right places. After dessert, Frank clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Kara," he said, "why don't you join me in the study for a moment?" People who have nothing good to say always invite you into rooms with heavy doors. His study smelled like old leather, cigar smoke, and the kind of whiskey that comes in bottles with more vowels than price tags. He poured himself a drink, didn't offer me one, and sat down in his oversized chair like a judge taking his seat. "Listen, young lady," he started. I swallowed an eye roll. I hate being called young lady, almost as much as he probably hates his golf score. "As you know," he continued, "Jason has some student loans from his master's program." Some turned out to be an interesting definition. He took a sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of the glass. "He's got about 87,000 left." I almost choked on air. "That's quite a lot," I said carefully. "Well," Frank replied, "he got his degree from a prestigious university, not some state school." He said it like I should be honored to even be in the same room as the debt. Before I could respond, Jason slipped into the study with a practiced little smile, his arm already reaching for mine. "Daddy's just explaining," he said, leaning against my side. "Nothing scary." Deborah appeared at the doorway a moment later, wine glass in hand, like this was a rehearsed entrance. Frank set his glass down. "A real partner, Kara, a real future wife, would take care of that before the wedding. A woman who wants to be seen as a provider," he nodded at me, "should clear her fiancé's debts so he can focus on building a life with her." Jason squeezed my arm. "My parents won't really respect you as a provider until you show you can take care of me," he said, almost gently. "It's just how they were raised." "And how we raised Jason," Deborah added smoothly. "A wife should enter marriage by clearing her husband's debts. It shows commitment." I looked at all 3 of them. The matching expressions. The way Deborah's eyes stayed on my face, but her fingers tapped lightly on the wineglass stem like she was keeping time to some internal script. This didn't feel like a spontaneous conversation. It felt like a performance they'd been rehearsing in the mirror. "I understand completely," I said. Jason brightened immediately. "So you'll do it?" "I understand your position," I repeated. "Let me think about it." Frank clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make my teeth click. "Smart girl, take your time, but not too much. The wedding's in 6 months." On the drive home, Jason was practically buzzing. "I knew you'd come around," he said, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel to some song only he could hear. Dad said you might need convincing, but I told him you were different from my exes. Your exes? I asked, staring out at the dark road ahead. Oh, you know. He shrugged. Tara couldn't commit to it. That's why we broke up. And before her, Grace said it was financial manipulation. Can you believe that? Like taking care of your future husband is manipulation. 2 ex-girlfriends who refused to pay his loans. Interesting pattern. Jason, I said carefully, $87,000 is a lot of money. I've been saving for a house down payment. He rolled his eyes like I'd brought up something tacky. We can live in an apartment for a few more years. Besides, once we're married, my parents will help us with a house, but only if they respect you first. Only if, the word sat in my stomach like a stone. That night, after Jason fell asleep on my couch with some mindless show playing in the background, I opened my laptop and a spreadsheet. I had $95,000 in savings. Years of saying no to things other people my age considered normal. Years of driving that rusting Honda. Years of skipping fancy trips and impulsive buys. Jason's loans, $87,000 at 6.8% interest. He'd been making minimum payments for 5 years. The balance had barely budged. He worked part-time at the gallery, making about $30,000 a year. His parents paid for everything his pride wouldn't let him admit he couldn't afford. His apartment, his car lease, the wardrobe that made him look like he belonged in those white-walled galleries. His degree in art history, with a focus on Renaissance sculptures, had never been about a career. It was about being able to say, Jason has a master's from prestigious university at parties. Meanwhile, my degree from a not-so-prestigious state school had gotten me a job, a career ladder, and a savings account I'd bled for. I did the math 5 different ways, hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into something more generous, more romantic. They didn't. If I paid off Jason's loans, I'd have almost nothing left. No down payment, no emergency fund, nothing to show for a decade of discipline except a man with a clean slate and parents who finally decided I was worthy to sit at their table. I stared at the spreadsheet until the lines blurred. Is this what love is supposed to look like? Is love proving yourself by handing someone else a check for their past choices? My chest tightened. I thought about the way Deborah had said a wife should enter marriage by clearing her husband's debts, like it was scripture. About the way Jason had said, "You're different from my exes," like it was a compliment when it was really a test. This wasn't about partnership. This was about obedience. I closed the laptop. On the coffee table, Jason's phone buzzed with a notification. His lock screen lit up, a photo of us at his parents' pool, me in a cheap swimsuit, him in designer sunglasses, his arms slung around my shoulders like he owned the shot. I looked at that version of myself, smiling, relaxed, unaware, and I felt something shift. I understand completely, I'd said. And I did. They weren't looking for a wife. They were looking for a solution. Something inside me went very, very still. I'm not the solution you think I am, I whispered into the quiet room. But I didn't say it out loud to them. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new tab and typed in a different kind of search. Houses for sale, I wrote, and added my city. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, quiet neighborhood. If they wanted me to prove I was financially responsible before marriage, I was going to do exactly that. Just not in the way they expected. Jason didn't notice the shift in me at first. Why would he? On the surface, nothing changed. I still went to work every morning, still texted him goodnight, still listened while he talked about gallery clients who didn't understand art. I still went to Sunday dinners at his parents' house, where Deborah complimented my dress, and Frank asked leading questions about my salary that he tried to pass off as small talk. If anything, Jason relaxed more. A week after the study conversation, he started sending me apartment listings. Since we're waiting on the house, he texted with heart emojis and a little house icon. No point in rushing. The house was no longer a house we'd someday buy together. It was an abstract concept dangling at the end of a condition I was supposed to meet. In his mind, I would empty my savings into his loans. His parents would clap approvingly and help us with a down payment later. My hard-earned money would disappear into the black hole of his past choices, and in return, I'd receive the honor of being called a respectable wife. Instead, every time he sent an apartment listing, I opened a new tab, this one with my own search filters. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, not too far from work, safe neighborhood, seller motivated. One listing kept popping up. It wasn't glamorous. The photos showed beige walls, an outdated kitchen with honey oak cabinets, and a backyard that looked like it had lost a fight with a weed whacker, but it had good bones, a solid roof, a quiet street, the kind of place you could grow into, not just pass through. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, listed at $220,000. I ran the math again. With my savings and a small personal loan I'd already been pre-approved for, I could buy it outright. No mortgage, just property taxes, utilities, repairs, real tangible security. One night, I met my friend Derek at a bar that pretended it wasn't a dive by using mason jars for cocktails. I told him everything. Jason, the loans, the respect, the tradition. The way his parents had looked at me like I was a walking checkbook. Derek stared at me for exactly 3 seconds before saying, "Bro, run." "I'm not a bro," I reminded him weakly. "You're right," he fired back. "You're a woman with almost $100,000 in savings and a functioning brain. Run." I laughed, but it came out thin. "I love him," I said quietly. Derek softened. "I know. I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying love doesn't mean signing an $87,000 check for someone else's degree because his parents think that's what real partnership looks like." He took a sip of his beer, narrowing his eyes. "What are you going to do?" "Something they won't expect," I said. The next day, I scheduled a viewing for the house. Walking through it felt like stepping into a rough draft of my future. The living room was small but bright. The kitchen counters were old, but the layout made sense. The main bedroom had a window that faced east. I could imagine morning light hitting my face while I drank coffee in bed. On weekends, I didn't have to be anybody's provider, but my own. During the inspection, I asked too many questions. The inspector didn't seem to mind. We crawled into the attic, checked the foundation, ran the water until the pipes sighed. By the time I left, I knew the house's flaws better than I knew Jason's. I made an offer. The seller, desperate to move quickly, accepted. Closing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Meanwhile, I told Jason I was working overtime on a huge project at work. "Wow," he said, scrolling through wedding venues on his phone. "You're really going to be able to handle my loans, no problem." "Yeah," I said, and this time when the guilt tried to rise, I pushed it back down. He was planning a bigger wedding now. Apparently, once I proved myself by paying off his loans, his parents would contribute more. Everything was conditional. The respect, the help, the future. All dependent on me handing over $87,000. 3 weeks later, I signed the last stack of papers with a ballpoint pen that had the bank's logo on it and a plastic flower taped to it. "Congratulations," the closing agent said. "You're a homeowner." The word hit me in the chest. Homeowner. Not wife, not daughter-in-law, not provider. Just me. I drove to the house afterward and stood in the empty living room, listening to the echo of my footsteps. The walls needed paint. The light fixtures were dated. The carpet in the hallway had a mysterious stain that I was 90% sure was coffee and 10% sure was a crime. It was perfect. My phone buzzed. "Jason, dinner at my parents' Sunday. Dad wants to talk about next steps. Don't worry, I told him you're on board." My reflection in the blank TV mount looked back at me, small and determined. "Let him talk," I murmured. Sunday came with its usual performance. Deborah greeted me at the door with an air kiss and a compliment about my conservative but tasteful dress. Frank poured himself a drink and asked Jason about his job in a way that somehow implied both pride and disappointment at the same time. But this dinner had extra guests. "Teresa and Clark are coming," Jason said, sliding an arm around my waist. "Dad thought it would be good for you to see how they handled things." Teresa is Jason's older sister, 36, a lawyer, the kind of woman who can make you feel like you signed something without ever handing you a pen. Her husband, Clark, is 34. His family owns a chain of restaurants. Together, they are Frank and Deborah's favorite success story. They arrived with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. During appetizers, Frank cleared his throat loudly, like a man about to give a sermon. "So," he announced, looking around the table, "Jason tells us Kara is ready to step up." Every eye turned to me. I set my fork down. "I've been thinking about it," I said. Teresa laughed lightly. "Finally." Took Clark's sister's fiancé 2 months to convince before he manned up and paid her loans. Clark nodded. "My brother-in-law paid $65,000. But Jason's worth more, right?" He winked at me. I smiled tightly. In another life, I might have let those words sink like hooks into my skin. In this one, I was already standing on my own porch in my head, keys in hand. "This isn't just about Jason," I said. "This seems like a family pattern." Deborah's smile froze for just a second. "It's tradition," she said smoothly. "A partner proves their commitment by handling debt. It's how we ensure our children are taken care of." "I'm just trying to understand the tradition," I said. "How much did you pay for Deborah's family debts when you got married?" I asked Frank. Color crept up his neck. That's not times were different. Of course. I turned to Teresa. And you, Teresa? Did you pay off any of Clark's debts when you got married? Teresa shook her head quickly. No. Clark had some loans from culinary school. His parents helped him with that. I tilted my head. So Clark's family paid his debts, but Clark's sister's fiancé had to pay hers? Well, Clark said, uncomfortable now, different situations. Right, I said softly. Under the table, Jason kicked my ankle. Babe, you're being weird, he muttered. I ignored him and looked at Deborah. The point, if I understand correctly, is that a partner who can't clear their fiancé's debts isn't ready for marriage? Or... Deborah nodded, relieved to be back on script. Exactly. A woman who wants to be a wife needs to show she can support her husband. I agree, I said. Everyone relaxed. Jason beamed at me like I'd just aced a test. Even Frank's shoulders dropped an inch. I think financial responsibility is crucial before marriage, I continued, which is why I've decided to be completely financially responsible before I marry anyone. I took a breath. I'm paying off my mortgage. Silence. Deborah blinked. Your what? My mortgage, I repeated. On my house. I bought a house. Closing was last week. I'm paying cash. No mortgage. Complete financial freedom before marriage, just like you all said. Frank's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled out of water. You bought a house? Jason's voice started off quiet, then sharpened. Without telling me? With our money? My money, I corrected gently. My savings. And yes, my house. Teresa set her wine glass down very carefully. Let's slow down a second. Jason's chair scraped back as he twisted to face me fully. His expression was something I'd never seen before. Hurt, outrage, and something uglier underneath. Entitlement. Exposed. You used your savings, he said slowly, like he was explaining it to himself as much as to me, to buy a house instead of paying my loans. Instead of paying $87,000 for a degree, I didn't earn from a school I didn't attend for a job that doesn't even cover its own interest? I asked. Yes. Clark let out a low whistle before catching Deborah's glare and clamping his mouth shut. Jason's hands curled into fists on the tablecloth. You promised you'd take care of me. I promised to be your partner, I said, not your ATM. Frank slammed his hand on the table, silverware jumping. You're making a mistake, young lady. No respectable woman would choose property over her future husband's needs. No respectable family, I replied calmly, would demand $87,000 as a dowry. It's not a dowry, Deborah snapped. It sounds like I have to pay $87,000 to earn your respect and marry your son, I said. That's literally what a dowry is. Jason's face flushed red. You're humiliating me, he hissed. You think you're so smart? You blindsided us. I looked around the table at their shocked, offended faces and felt something inside me go very, very still. I didn't blindside you, I said quietly. You just assumed I was an open wallet. The room held its breath. And then the shouting began. Are you kidding me right now? Jason's voice cracked like glass, high and disbelieving. You bought a house behind my back? With our future money? I stayed seated, calm. With my money, I said again, slowly this time. Money I earned, money I saved. Frank pushed his chair back, his face turning the same shade as his wine. You think this is some kind of game? You've embarrassed my family in our home. Deborah stood too, hands trembling, but voice sharp. We welcomed you like a daughter, Kara. And this is how you repay us? By throwing your independence in our faces? I thought independence was what you wanted, I said. You told me to prove I could take care of Jason. So I did. I just chose to take care of myself first. Jason laughed bitterly, the sound brittle. So that's it? You just, what? Decide I'm not worth it? You think I'm some kind of burden? I met his eyes. I think you're an adult who should handle his own loans. He flinched like I'd hit him. Teresa cleared her throat. Let's discuss this rationally, she said, sliding into her practiced attorney tone. Kara, I understand wanting to secure yourself financially, but you and Jason are a couple. His debts are part of your shared future. His debts, I repeated softly, not mine. And right now, there's no shared future. Jason's face fell. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, standing up slowly, that if our future depends on me writing a check for $87,000, we don't actually have one. Clark raised his brows but stayed silent. Even he seemed to sense this was beyond saving. Deborah's voice trembled. You think love is about numbers? About money? I turned to her. No, I think manipulation is. You all made my love conditional on a bank transfer. Frank pointed at me like he was delivering a verdict. You'll regret this, young lady. You'll regret walking away from a good man because of money. I tilted my head. If he were a good man, you wouldn't need to bribe me into proving it. Jason stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You're twisting everything. You said you understood. You looked me in the eye and said you'd think about it. I did think about it, I said evenly. And I made my decision. His jaw tightened. Cancel the house. I laughed, short and humorless. No. Cancel it, he repeated, voice rising. We can still fix this. Fix what? I asked. Me having a place to live that's mine? He slammed his hand on the table. Yes! Teresa shot him a warning look, but he didn't see it. He was too far gone. Kara, he said, lowering his voice, if you loved me, you'd do this. You'd help me. If you loved me, I cut in, you wouldn't ask. For a moment, no one spoke. Frank's knuckles whitened around his glass. Deborah's lips pressed together until they disappeared entirely. Teresa sat back, calculating. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. Then, softly but clearly, I said, we're done. Jason blinked, as if he hadn't heard me right. What? You said cancel the house or we're done, I reminded him. So, we're done, Deborah gasped. You can't mean that. Frank barked. You'll never find another man like my son. I'm counting on it, I said, picking up my purse. Jason followed me into the hallway, voice trembling. You can't just walk out, Kara. We have deposits, plans, a wedding. Plans that depended on my money, I said. Since your parents were only paying after I proved myself, remember? He looked so young then. Angry, panicked, cornered. For 1 second, I almost pitied him. Almost. I opened the door. You can pick up your things this weekend. He grabbed my arm. Kara, let go. His grip loosened. I didn't look back as I stepped outside. The night air was cold. It smelled like rain and relief. I spent that night at Derek's place. When he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask a single question. Just grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and handed me one. So, he said finally, how'd it go? I took a long sip. I'm single, I said, and I own a house. He grinned. My girl. We clinked bottles. The harassment started before I even finished unpacking. That first night, 62 texts from Jason, ranging from, how could you, to, I love you, to, you're a selfish monster. Then, 31 messages from a new group chat titled, Miller Family Discussion. Frank, you humiliated us. Deborah, please reconsider Kara. Be reasonable. Teresa, I can help draft a repayment agreement. We can make this fair. I typed one message. My decision is final. Please stop contacting me. Then I muted the entire thread. By morning, my phone had 30 missed calls. By lunch, my email inbox had 3 new messages from Jason. The subject lines read, we can work this out. You owe me an explanation. Please. I ignored all 3. On Monday, he showed up at my office. He came in holding 2 coffees, smiling like the last week hadn't happened. Can we talk? He asked softly. Just 5 minutes. My coworker, Beth, blunt, fearless, twice divorced, peeked over her cubicle wall. Girl, you better walk away, she said loud enough for him to hear. This man's trying to refinance your peace. Jason's smile faltered. This doesn't concern you. You're in her workplace, Beth said, standing up. It kind of does. When Jason refused to leave, security escorted him out. He looked back once, his face a mix of disbelief and humiliation, like the rules of gravity had suddenly changed without warning him. That evening, my mom called. Honey, she said, Deborah called me. Oh, great. She said you humiliated their family and broke Jason's heart. I sighed. And what did you say? I said, she replied, voice sharp as ever, my daughter's too smart to pay for someone else's degree unless it's her own child's. I smiled. Thanks, Mom. She also said, Mom added dryly, that Jason's considering legal action. I laughed. For what? Emotional damages because I didn't buy his diploma? Exactly what I said, she chuckled. Good for you, baby. Be proud of yourself. You handled this like a Mitchell. I hung up smiling for the first time in days. But Jason wasn't finished. The next day, an email came through. Subject, let's compromise. I've been thinking, maybe we moved too fast with the loan thing. What if you pay half now and half after the wedding? Daddy says that's reasonable. I deleted it. The day after. Subject, please. Okay. What if you just pay $40,000? The rest I'll handle. We can live in your house together. I can help decorate. I didn't respond to that one either. Then came the final wave. A series of messages escalating in desperation and anger. You're going to die alone. No one will ever want a woman this selfish. You wasted 4 years of my life. You'll never be good enough for anyone. My family has connections. You're done in this city. That last one I forwarded to my lawyer friend just in case. Derek read it over my shoulder and muttered, "Extinction burst." What? It's what happens when people lose control, he said. They throw everything at you: rage, guilt, pity, hoping something sticks. He raised his beer in salute. Let him go extinct. I clinked my bottle to his. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming about numbers or deadlines or wedding deposits. Just silence. Peaceful. Earned. And mine. By the next week, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. I was wrong. When people like Jason lose control, they don't surrender quietly. They rebrand their pain. The first post went up on his social media on a Tuesday afternoon. Imagine giving someone 4 years of your life, helping them grow, supporting their dreams, only for them to choose property over love. Some people are just users. He attached a photo of the two of us from a vacation last summer. I looked happy in it. He looked like he'd just won something. The comments came fast. "You deserve better, King." She sounds heartless. Money-hungry women always lose in the end. I stared at the post for a long moment, thumb hovering over the report button. Then I just took a screenshot and sent it to Derek. He texted back instantly. "Bro, he's publicly imploding. Don't touch it yet." That night, I made tea, sat at my kitchen counter, the one with a little crack in the marble I hadn't fixed yet, and opened my laptop. If Jason wanted to turn this into a story, fine. I'd give the audience facts. I posted a single comment under his post. Interesting perspective. For clarity, I saved money from my full-time job for 4 years. I was asked to pay $87,000 in student loans for a degree I didn't earn, from a school I didn't attend, for a job that pays less than half the loan amount. When I chose to buy a home instead, I was dumped. You decide who the user was. Then I locked my phone and went to bed. By morning, his post was gone. The internet had done what the internet does best, tore through hypocrisy like paper. Screenshots of my comment were already circulating, shared by strangers who didn't even know us. The general consensus was swift and brutal. $87K for an art history degree? Nah. She's not heartless, she's financially literate. He really said, "Pay my bills and prove your love"? When I walked into work that morning, Beth grinned over her coffee. "Girl, you're trending, and not in a bad way." I blinked. What? She turned her laptop toward me. A Reddit post titled, "Woman Refuses to Pay Fiancé's Student Loans. His Family Loses It," was sitting at the top of r// am I the asshole. My words, paraphrased but unmistakable, had gone viral. I buried my face in my hands. Oh no. "Oh yes," Beth said. "You're basically the patron saint of boundaries right now." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, maybe both. Jason must have seen it too, because within hours the group text started again. New numbers every time I blocked the old ones. His mother emailed my boss, claiming I was emotionally unstable and harassing her son. My boss forwarded it to HR with one line. "FYI, this is clearly nonsense. She's fine. Also, we stan Kara." I wanted to be angry. Instead, I laughed until I cried. Then came what Derek called the flying monkeys. Jason's cousin texted, "You really hurt the family. Can't you reconsider?" His best friend Dwayne DM'd me. "She's on antidepressants because of you." His mom's church friend messaged me on Facebook. "I'm praying you see the error of your ways." Each one got the same response. "Please stop contacting me." Then, block. But the best one came from Teresa's husband, Clark. "Hey, Kara, my brother's single. He paid his wife's loans like a real man. Want me to set you two up?" I stared at the message, smirked, and typed back. "Sure. Does he have any student loans I'll be expected to pay?" Blocked within 30 seconds. Worth it. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way fresh snow is quiet. Soft, still, and a little unreal. I moved into my house properly, spent a Saturday painting the kitchen cabinets white, blasting music, and drinking cheap champagne out of a mug. Every brushstroke felt like a small declaration. This is mine. The yard was still a mess, but it was my mess. The bills were mine. The silence was mine. I was free. And freedom, it turned out, wasn't loud or cinematic. It was the slow, steady peace of knowing no one had a claim on your choices. 2 weeks later, I ran into an older woman at a coffee shop. She was in line ahead of me, ordering something complicated with oat milk and honey drizzle. When she turned, I recognized her immediately. "Karen," I said, blinking. She'd worked with Jason at the gallery. Kind, gossipy, perpetually overdressed. "Kara," she said, eyes widening. "Oh, honey, did you hear?" "Hear what?" She leaned in conspiratorially. "Jason's engaged." I almost dropped my latte. Already? She nodded solemnly. To some cardiologist his parents set him up with. Huge ring. They're planning a spring wedding. I let out a laugh that startled the barista. Good for him. Karen lowered her voice. Rumor is she doesn't know about his loans yet. His parents told him not to mention them until after the wedding. I nearly spit out my coffee. You're kidding. She shook her head. Poor woman. I hope she's got better boundaries than the last one. Me too, I said softly. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Frank, Jessica's getting married to a cardiologist. He makes 3 times what you make. She's upgrading. Your loss. I took a photo of my living room, freshly painted, sunlight streaming across the floorboards, a mug of coffee on the windowsill. Me. My gain. Then I blocked the number. 3 months after that, I stood in my backyard, pruning the overgrown shrubs, when Derek yelled over the fence. Hey, homeowner! Zillow says your place went up 15 grand already. I laughed. Best investment I ever made. Later, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sky turn gold. My phone buzzed, an email notification. It was from Jason. I almost ignored it, but the subject line made me snort, peace offering. Inside was an electronic wedding invitation. Jason Miller and Dr. Elizabeth Hart invite you to celebrate their union. I scrolled to the registry link, clicked it, and sent them a calculator. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. That night, I wrote one final line in my journal. The best revenge isn't rage, it's peace. It's walking away with your self-respect and never explaining twice. I closed the notebook and smiled to myself. The kitchen still needed new tiles. The bathroom faucet dripped sometimes. The lawn was patchy. But every inch of it was mine. Every flaw, every imperfection, every ounce of hard-earned freedom, mine. Jason needed someone to pay for his past. I chose to invest in my future. Best $220,000 I ever spent. A few weeks after the calculator incident, I honestly thought that was the last of it. But entitlement, I've learned, doesn't dissolve. It just goes quiet until it finds a new audience. One afternoon, I was working from home when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of my driveway, the kind of car that never parked in this neighborhood. I watched from the window as Frank Miller stepped out, crisp polo tucked into ironed khakis, expensive sunglasses glinting. He walked up my path like a man who'd never been told no in his life. I didn't move. I wanted to see what he'd do. After a few seconds, the doorbell rang, then again, then pounding. I opened the door just enough for him to see the chain latch still in place. Frank? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk. No, we don't. He took off his sunglasses. His gaze flicked past me into the house, scanning the furniture like he was taking inventory. You've done well for yourself, he said. Nice place. Shame you'll ruin it with pride. I'm sorry? I'm giving you one chance to fix this, he said. You humiliated my family, Kara. You made us look like parasites. You didn't need my help with that, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. Jason is getting married. To a doctor. She's everything you're not. Graceful, educated, accomplished, and she understands family tradition. Does she understand the $87,000 part of that tradition? I asked. He blinked. What? Your son's loans. Did you tell her about them, or are you saving that surprise for the honeymoon? His face flushed deep red. How dare you? I leaned against the doorframe, calm. Frank, if you came here to intimidate me, you're wasting your time. You're trespassing, by the way. You'll never find another man like Jason, he said, voice trembling with anger. That's the point. He took a step forward, but the chain rattled. You don't know what you've thrown away. Oh, I do, I said, and it was heavy. He glared. You think this house makes you better than us? No, I said, it makes me free. He sneered. You'll die alone in that empty house. I smiled faintly. At least I'll die debt-free. That did it. His face went purple. If you don't leave, I'll call the police, I said. And then I'll post the Ring doorbell footage of you showing up to lecture me about not paying your son's student loans. Something tells me the internet would love that sequel. Frank's mouth opened, then closed. He turned without another word, stormed down the path, and drove off fast enough to rattle the neighbor's mailbox. I stood in the doorway for a long time after, the echo of his anger hanging in the air like static. Then I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. That was the last time any of them came near me. Months passed. The house started to feel more like home. I replaced the leaky faucet, learned how to patch drywall, painted the bedroom a pale blue that looked like morning light. On weekends, Derek and I would sit on the porch, beer bottles sweating between us, laughing about nothing. Sometimes he'd tease me. Still waiting for your apology from the Millers? Please, I'd say. If they ever apologize, it'll be to their accountant. Then, one morning, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. Heavy paper, hand addressed. The return address said Miller Residence. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was an invitation. Thick ivory cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing that costs more per piece than my monthly utilities. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Miller request the honor of your presence at the wedding of their son, Jason Miller, to Dr. Elizabeth Hart. Same venue we had booked, same spring date. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I started laughing. The kind of laugh that builds slowly, rising until tears blur your vision. I pulled out my phone, opened their registry link, and bought the smallest calculator Amazon had to offer. Gift wrapped it, added a note, "For budgeting together. Congratulations." 2 days later, the order confirmation arrived. A petty gesture? Maybe, but sometimes closure wears a bow. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the wedding had gone through. Lavish, over the top. Jason's parents spared no expense. Apparently, the new wife didn't learn about the loans until the week after the honeymoon. The friend who told me said it like gossip, but I just nodded. That sounds about right. Because here's the truth. People like Jason, like Frank and Deborah, they don't change. They just move on to the next person willing to pay the price of their approval. And people like me, people who've learned what peace costs, we never make that mistake twice. Now, when I walk through my house, I can still feel the ghost of that first night I moved in. The emptiness that wasn't lonely but full, like possibility waiting to be filled. The walls are painted now. The rooms smell faintly of lemon oil and new beginnings. The yard's still a little wild, but I like it that way. Imperfect, real, mine. Sometimes I think about that dinner table, the way Frank looked at me, the way Jason's voice cracked when I said no. And I realized something. That night wasn't a breakup. It was a rebirth. For years, I'd been taught that love was sacrifice, that respect had to be earned with proof, not presence. Now I know better. Love doesn't demand a receipt. Respect doesn't require a transaction. And peace doesn't come from anyone else's approval. It comes from the quiet of a house you bought with your own hands, in a life that finally belongs entirely to you. So no, I didn't lose Jason. I lost the illusion that I needed him. And in return, I found something infinitely better. Freedom.